For joining us today. I'm Paul Bauman, and I'm honored to serve as the Rotary Club of Tulsa president this year. You're attending a meeting of the best Rotary Club in the world, Club number 2500 in District 6110. Our program committee has put together another great program for us today. But first, it's with great sadness that I want to announce the passing of past President Alan J. Edwards Jr. He was a devoted member of our club for 69 years, a true Rotarian. So please pause with me for a special memorial tribute in his honor.
Dear friends, it would be Will Rogers who would say, "You must judge a man's greatness by how much he will be missed." He also said, "What constitutes a life well lived anyhow? Love and admiration of your fellow man is all that one can ask." You know, when I hear the name Alan Edwards, it always brings a smile. His gregarious, infectious personality made everyone feel happy just to be in his presence. His passing gave me pause to reflect on how much I'm going to miss him. And I'm sure you will too. For everyone who knew him, and even if you didn't know him, you had to realize that his accomplishments were many. He was a giant among men. I thought he was a giant gentleman whose legacy will live on through his family and the thousands and thousands of lives that have been touched through the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. Alan's vision of a sustaining foundation, which now is over $4 million, began in 1972 and is given back to our community, state, national, and international projects. You know, April the 16th would have been his 70th year to be in this Rotary Club. I think that's a real testament to his life and his dedication to service. And you know, there would be another man who had a great vision, whose contributions have impacted our entire world in ways we will never know. Alan reminds me kind of like Rotary International's founder, Paul Harris, a man with a vision. Well, you all know the rest of the story. When Paul Harris died, his last request was that there be no flowers, but only contributions to a Rotary Foundation for the Paul Harris Memorial. And so, Alan's spirit is going to live on. And for me, I plan to honor him with a contribution to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation to the Alan Edwards Memorial.
Good afternoon. I am absolutely delighted, honored that I've been asked to be the Rotarian of the Day and to introduce one of our own, Phil Armstrong. You know, I could just say, welcome, Phil. Everybody knows you. But when I asked him to send me a little information, he sent the same bio that you all got. So I called him and I said, I got to have something more than this. So he shared with me, I asked the question, how did you get to Tulsa? And it was his freshman year in college at Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, that he met a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School, a young man by the name of Michael McQuarters. Some of you may recognize that name. Michael's relative, I think it was a cousin, played for Oklahoma State University and then was drafted by the 49ers. And so it was this Michael who introduced Phil to Tulsa for the very first time. They both finished their undergraduate work and then their graduate work. And Michael kept asking Phil to send his resume to him. He kept talking about Tulsa. You need to come. You need to come. And finally, according to Phil, just to get Michael to shut up, he sent him a resume. And it was just a couple of weeks later that Phil, imagine this, got a call from a recruiter. And so he moved to Tulsa. And I said, well, does your friend still live here? No, it was 2 years after Phil got here and began building a life in Tulsa that his good friend moved to Denver. So we still need to thank Michael McQuarters for introducing Tulsa to Phil. Um, he and his Phil and his adorable wife Monique. I hope that many of you have had the pleasure of meeting her. She is unique. They have a blended family, 2 boys, 2 girls. 3 of them are in college, and one of them is a graduate at Jinx High School. Phil also told me that every week they are challenged to seek scholarships for to further their education. We all know Phil is a great singer. I could listen to him for hours on end, but let's hear what he has to say today about Greenwood Rising. Please welcome one of our own, Phil Armstrong.
First of all, thank you, and thank you to Michelle. I can remember in August 2014 when Joseph Bias and Paula Wood were my co-sponsors to become a Rotary member, and it was 2015 when we first introduced and created the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And Hannibal Johnson and myself and Michelle Place, we were the first committee members to get that started. So Michelle has been a wealth of knowledge. She serves on the education committee with Hannibal, and many of the pictures, the historical pictures that you will see in the next few months in Greenwood Rising, we were able to have a licensing agreement with the Tulsa Historical Society, and they will get plenty of reference and credit for all that they have done. To this day, I think, I hope I'm saying this right, they still have the largest collection of all the photos from that period. And I think it's still one of the #1 downloads from around the world. When people log in to Tulsa Historical Society, one of their top downloads from around the world is anything they have on this history. So without any further ado, let me jump into the presentation. I'm going to share my screen and go through a few slides prepared. First thing I'm going to show is, I don't know how many of you were aware, you've heard it in the news and you've heard it talked about many times, but I don't know if you were around or had an HBO subscription. And on August the 20th, 2019, when the HBO Watchmen decided to put for the first time the most visual presentation of what it must have been like in the midst of the massacre. I'd like to present this, and I'd like to show this so it can put everybody in the frame of mind of what people brings your mind to what was experienced during that time. And we'll talk about this first 3 minutes and 38 seconds. Imagine people from around the world who are tuning in to see what this Watchmen comic come to life is going to be about. And to their surprise, the first 3 minutes and 38 seconds, this is the first thing that they saw. And we'll talk about it when we come on the other side. So I would really like to stop there before going forward and just talk about the film and address some things that this film really brings out. First of all, the Monday after that debuted, for the next 2 weeks, I was on, and Hannibal Johnson and various members of the commission were on various calls with news agencies, not only locally, but every major news network, from Fox News to CNN to Headline News to the BBC, and they were calling to ask about that first 3-minute sequence. And they always ask the same couple of questions, and I'm summarizing here. Did you see The Watchmen? And they would ask, hey, how much of that was Hollywood hype? Like really planes flying over, and how much of that was real and how much was a fake? And then once you went through that and talked about those were eyewitness accounts that are held at the Oklahoma Historical Society of actual planes flying over and dropping incendiary devices, and the shooting that was taking place, and the mayhem and the carnage, then they all would ask, the next question was pretty much the same. If this really happened, how come nobody knows about it? That's the crux of the situation, is that for so many years, this was not talked about, it was not taught. And to this day, I still get emails every now and then from Black citizens and white citizens from Tulsa who are in their mid-30s, some in their early 40s, and they'll say, do you know the first time I ever heard about this? I was in a college course outside of Oklahoma that I had to sit in a class and see a history professor show these pictures and show these images, and they're talking about this place I grew up in, and I did not know anything about it. And again, Black and white that will say that, again, the same things. First of all, I was shocked. Second of all, I was embarrassed because everybody in the class is looking at me and say, hey, aren't you from Oklahoma? Did this happen? And they have to sit there and say, I don't know what this is. Never seen this before. And then the third thing it would say is, they got angry. Why would I have to leave Oklahoma to find out this and be a grown person? So some of that is what I like to use to show the impetus of where we are today and what we're trying to do with some of the work of the Centennial Commission. That 3-minute sequence does a couple of things, and I'll go back to sharing my screen. It gives homage to a couple of historical figures and a couple of historical places. First of all, the young lady who's playing pianos in the famed Lula Williams Dreamland Theater. It was the way it was talked about in the history books is that it was the place for shows, and it boasted of being the only theater house in Oklahoma with air conditioning, whatever air conditioning would be in 1921. But this was the place where high performing art took place, and music and shows. And of course, it was destroyed after 1921 and not rebuilt. Also, it gives reference to, in the beginning, I don't know how many of you ever heard of Bass Reeves, but Bass Reeves was an actual, real, the first Black U.S. deputy marshal that served west of the Mississippi. He oversaw the Arkansas and Oklahoma territory. He was very shrewd and very had a crafty way of tricking his fugitives that he would capture. He could speak fluent Cherokee, he could speak fluent Creek, so it allowed him to be very successful interweaving and being multilingual in with the Native Americans and African Americans and whites who lived here. You can see there he is accredited with bringing over 3,000 felons to justice and only had to kill 14 people in self-defense of his duties. And it is historians credit the real life of Bass Reeves for the character of the Lone Ranger, as seen here, season 2, episode 4 of the Gunslingers. They talk about and give reference to Bass Reeves, who was the quote unquote real Lone Ranger. So let's get into the history. Tulsa's historic Greenwood district reflects the power of the human spirit generally, the vision, determination, and resilience. That's the key word that we kind of use throughout Greenwood Rising, the resilience of its oppressed and marginalized Black citizens specifically. Our own fellow Rotarian, Hannibal Johnson, as you know, is the foremost authority, has spent 30 years writing. Now he's written his, I think his 10th book now on this history. And inside of this book, we like to feature a letter. Some of you may have heard him read this before. I'll show it now. Letter between Oliver and Curtis, the days after the riot. Dear Oliver, I am by our local newspaper fully advised of the whole terrible tragedy there. Now that they have destroyed your homes, wrecked your schools, churches, and business places, and killed your people, I am sure that the Negroes will rapidly give up the town and move north. Enclosed, please find draft for $40 to purchase your ticket to Detroit. We'll be expecting you, Curtis. And his response, Dear Curtis, how kind of you to volunteer your sympathetic assistance. It is just like you to be helpful to others in time of stress like this. True it is, we are facing a terrible situation. It is equally true that they have destroyed our homes, they have wrecked our schools, they have reduced our churches to ashes, and they have murdered our people, Curtis. But they have not touched our spirit. And while I speak only for myself, let it be said that I came here and built my fortune with that spirit. I shall reconstruct it here with that spirit, and I expect to live on and die here with it, Oliver. And it's with that spirit that we build Greenwood Rising, the Black Wall Street History Center, 11,000 square foot facility that will not just talk about the massacre, but will tell the full narrative, the history of Greenwood, the historic Black towns of Oklahoma, tell the entire story of Black citizens and the history of their achievements in Oklahoma that led to a Greenwood. These are a few renderings. This is a nighttime rendering. The many community meetings that we had with the community is that they wanted this to have a strong pedestrian factor. And so at night, this will be lit up and light up the entire Greenwood district. So people can visit this area day or night and be able to experience Greenwood Rising. Here are a few more renderings of the building. It's under construction now, and we are set to actually debut the building and dedicate it during the week of Centennial, planned for Wednesday, June the 2nd. We're hoping to dedicate the building in a limited fashion. So we're going to go through a couple of exhibits, and I'm going to make my way through these slides pretty quickly. The first is the Greenwood Spirit, where you'll learn about the pioneers of Greenwood and the early days of Greenwood. Talk about the historic Black towns of Oklahoma, long before there was a Greenwood. By 1880, you had these towns that were owned, occupied, businesses, homes, all by African Americans. By the 1940s, there were over 50 all Black towns of Oklahoma. It's interesting to note that in 1883, a man by the name of E.P. McCabe, he was from Arkansas, he was an attorney and land settler, and he was very active, African American active, to try to get African Americans to run for public office and to do their civic duty and vote. And he actually was the first to actually start having discussions about whether Oklahoma should be an all Black state. I'm sure you never saw that or heard that in your history books. But yes, 1883, long before the land run of 1889, they were talking and having discussions that maybe Oklahoma should just be a Black state. So these are things that we want to give people some enlightenment on and education on. Another thing is to give people an awareness of just how big Greenwood was, how large the area was. A lot, you can see my cursor here. This is where the historic Greenwood Chamber buildings are. This is where the corner of Greenwood and Archer, where Greenwood Rising will be built. But 10 to 12,000 African Americans occupied this area of Greenwood. It was a very large, 33 to 35 city blocks were destroyed during that time of 1921. So it was a very wide, prosperous area, and I like to give that perspective. Back to the Greenwood Spirit, we'll have pioneers. You'll see there E.W. Woods, the first principal of Booker T. Washington High School, and many other pioneers that people will learn about. We want to have a very strong educational emphasis. We have already have funding and have donors contributing money so that we can have a very robust field trip program for schools, not only in Tulsa and surrounding areas, but even from Oklahoma City, so that they can come and learn about the Trail of Tears and the Freedmen. They can learn about Black boosterism in the all Black towns and the Tulsa Rising and the pioneers. So a very strong educational awareness aspect. We are proud to feature anybody that knows anything about the Black community historically. They would receive their news, their politics, their fellowship would be either in the Black church or the barber shop. And so we will have designed by local projects, expert design firm out of New York City who designed and did contributing work to the 9/11 Museum, also did a lot of work for the Legacy Museum and working with Brian Stevenson in the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. And they are designing a hologram barbershop experience that will tell the story of a community. So imagine being in this chamber or this exhibit space and these holograms laughing and talking and the jargon that goes back and forth, talking about Greenwood and the heyday of Greenwood and the technology to be of such that if a young student sits in the chair, the hologram will turn and act as if it's cutting their hair and even talking to the person. In this instance, imagine the hologram speaking to you and saying, never forget where you come from and who you are. We're really excited about this interactive, engaging experience. From what we have been told by local projects, Greenwood Rising will be the only history museum grade facility in the world that will have a hologram barbershop experience to tell the story of a community. We'll have a timeline that talks about the arc of oppression and the rise of animosity and racial division that was taking place in America, even in the beginning of December 8th, 1907, when Oklahoma became a first state, and the first law that was enacted and placed on the books was Jim Crow, and it leads up through 1911 and the lynching of Laura Nelson in Okemah, Oklahoma, 1916, and the ordinance in Tulsa City to make it illegal for Blacks and whites to live in the same community, to the summer of 1919, when over a dozen towns that were around the country, from New York to DC to Houston to Elaine, Arkansas, and the list goes on, that from a 6-month period from the summer of 1919 through the winter, just racial uprisings where mobs just went in to destroy and wreak havoc in Black communities. And so this leads to a narrative. 1921 was not an incident into itself. Hannibal Johnson speaks so many times, so eloquently, that Tulsa was a powder keg and all it needed was a striking of the match. There was so much racial animosity here. And that striking of the match was here at the Drexler building, as we're aware, May 30th, 1921, when what was printed in the paper, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator," the elevator incident between Dick Rowland, 19-year-old Black shoeshine boy, and 17-year-old Sarah Page on the elevator, that then turned into him getting arrested. The next day, a lynch mob forms around the Tulsa police, the jail, and about a dozen or so African-American men from Greenwood with their own munitions come down to protect Dick Rowland, to keep him from getting lynched that day. And as you can see here, as it's listed here in the paper, and I'll read it here, you can read along, about 10 p.m., investigator named E.S. McQueen confronted a Black man identified as Johnny Cole in front of the courthouse. McQueen and Cole wrestled over the gun. It discharged. And at that moment, more than one person observed, quote, "all hell broke loose." First shots were fired at approximately 10:30 p.m. and the devastation for 16 hours from that point took over Greenwood, and the devastation that we still commemorate, that we educate, and we review and look at here today. But that's not where we leave the story, because the real story is the resilience of a community. Early on in our community meetings, many of those in North Tulsa and around the community said, listen, don't just focus on the massacre. We realize people come here for that event, but we want people to know the full story about how wonderful Greenwood was. Tell them how they rebuilt it. And I've had many conversations over the last several months when news agencies call and different people call about the history. There are so many people that think time stood still in 1921. So many people are unaware that this community rebuilt itself. In fact, 80 to 90% of Greenwood was rebuilt by 1926, 5 years later. fact, 1926, the National Negro Chamber of Commerce had their national meeting here right in Greenwood. And to put it in perspective, I kind of share this just as a summary, or just to put it again in perspective. You can't host a national meeting, a gathering, unless you have hotel rooms, unless you have restaurants for people to stay, unless you have things for people to do. So within 5 years, they rebuilt their community, which is phenomenal, and all without the aid of insurance. They could not file insurance claims because it was labeled a riot, and they could not get remuneration from the city or the state that were complicit. And so it's just a phenomenal story of resilience. We will feature another chamber called Changing Fortunes. The peak of the economic activity of Greenwood was actually in the mid 1940s, when you had over 200 businesses, over 1,200 Black-owned homes, and grocery stores and hospitals. So Greenwood actually became bigger and better than it was prior to its destruction. Again, a phenomenal story of resilience. So then we talk about the decline. What happened? What led to its decline? And we talk about the building of the I-244 program that was the death nail that right through the heart of Greenwood. We talk about integration and its impact on communities of color. And we talk about mom and pop businesses that their children went on to college. They left Oklahoma, they never came back. And 60s, 70s, and 80s, you see the decline of Greenwood because many of these mom and pop businesses did not have anyone to pass their businesses down to. And when they died, most of their businesses died out with them. That leads into the feature of Greenwood Rising, and that is the journey to reconciliation. An amphitheater style space, a classroom type facility or area where after you get this history, people can sit and have discussions, these difficult discussions about race, about where we are as a society. We can change as many laws and policies as we want, but until you start changing the way people think about other people, until you start changing their mind, their perceptions, their heart, all we're going to do is continue to go around this mountain. And so this space actually is a safe space designed to have discussion. Imagine, I've said this before, imagine if Greenwood Rising was alive and well and operating today, the number of community discussions that we would have had about the impact of George Floyd and how do we deal with that as a nation, as a society. The impact of Ahmaud Arbery, a Black man running through a neighborhood, and he's thought as a robber and gets shot and murdered in a neighborhood. How do we talk about that and the different issues of that? How does a community like Tulsa, still trying to heal and reel from a Terrence Crutcher shooting, where you still have citizens that think that there's still justice has not been served? How do we come together over difficult issues and walk away starting this journey of racial healing and racial reconciliation? This is going to be the feature. Can you imagine, of all places, Tulsa, Oklahoma, becoming the center of the United States where people can come and experience racial reconciliation, harmony, and healing? So as I draw to a close here, the other project that we're working on, the Pathway to Hope, this will be a walking path, a historical and experience walking path that will take you from Greenwood over to Elgin and take you right into the John Hope Franklin Park. And it's seen as a symbol of rejoining the district that was separated and destroyed by I-244. There will be benches here, beautiful landscaping. There'll be artwork, visual pioneers from Greenwood, a place where people can gather and reflect and rejoin this district in a symbolic way, and allow people to walk around the district and visit all the iconic sites that we have. Greenwood Chamber Buildings, John Hope Franklin Park, Greenwood Cultural Center, Mount Vernon AME Church, and the list goes on and on. People can spend an entire day experiencing history and walk around and experience what is Greenwood, or what was Greenwood, and hopefully what will soon be Greenwood Rising again. Like to show how much benefit and how much support has come from not only Tulsa citizens and organizations and companies around Oklahoma, but also outside of Oklahoma, foundations. And I'd like to highlight here the Tulsa Rotary Club, who donated $82,000 to the Greenwood Rising effort, and specifically 12,000 of that will go towards the Bench by the Road project. We'll be the first organization that has been approved to receive 2 benches. They've never done that before. And we'll be actually dedicating those in the latter part of February or March. So look for that as we draw closer. To find out more history, visit our website, tulsa2021.org. You can continue to make donations. Of our $30 million goal, as of last week, we have reached almost 28 million in pledges. So we're just under the $1 million mark. We're still looking for people just like you to help us get over that finish line. It's phenomenal, 2.5 years of a community coming together and raising almost $30 million for the effort and the work. And so you can make donations there and keep up with the history and keep up with what they're doing and the events for 2021, or sign up and get the newsletter and see what we're doing each month as we send that out to you. So I know I rushed through those slides, but I wanted to abide by the time that was allotted and give you a good, hopefully whet your appetite for what's coming. And I think if you have to be living under a rock if you don't realize where our nation is and how divided we are. A Greenwood Rising is needed now more than ever. For such a time as this, it's amazing the thousands of people who are already booking hotels. We've gone from the Tulsa Visitors Bureau and Ray Hoyt and Laura Snedden working with us and taking all calls and organizing hotels. We've gone from 4 to 6 to 8 hotels now, and now adding even more. COVID or not, here they come. We just have to get ready for it. Thousands of people from around the United States and around the world are going to be here in May and June. So for those that want to get your B&B ready, Airbnb, there's opportunity there for everybody but we want to see you here. We want to see you enjoy this history with us, and look for more information as we're planning some very high level worldwide broadcasting events for that week of the centennial from May 31st all the way to June 6th. So, but that's it. If there are any questions or anybody have anything, I don't know if you dropped anything in the chat, but
Yeah. Phil, thank you very much. A couple of things have come through. I see lots of questions, and you sort of just answered it about events that are being planned. So what's going to be broadcast? Just give us a taste of some of the things you know about.
We have a commemorative, if you go to the Tulsa2021.org, we have all the events. We actually distributed a calendar out to our networks, and it's the year of commemoration. So there are several things going on. The Greenwood Arts Project, pretty much the commemorative grants program. There will be things happening almost every week in a small nature, but the big events, you can pretty much, the bookend will be May 26th, Wednesday, beginning with the John Hope Franklin Annual Symposium that they have every year. And that will lead up to the centennial all the way to Sunday, June the 6th. And there are major events each day. Monday, Memorial Day, is the huge commemorative event that we'll have. We have the Tulsa Driller Stadium and the B.O. Kane Center on hold. We're going to be announcing in the next couple of months who are the keynote address and the celebrities and those that will be here to help commemorate that history with us. We'll have an economic empowerment day. We're going to have a dedication of the building. We're going to have a National Day of Learning on Thursday. Friday, we're actually having actor Tim Reed and Clifton Talbert is going to host a film festival on that Friday. Saturday, we're doing a Dreamland again event, a collaboration between the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra and artists around Tulsa, and hopefully a choir and be able to bring hip hop and jazz and classical and spirituals all in a beautiful concert. And it all ends on Sunday, the Black Wall Street Greenwood 5K run to culminate everything. And a lot of things are happening. Prior to that, you've got the senior PGA, and they're partnering with us. They're going to do a lot of things to promote our work. They're going to bring the returning champion to tour Greenwood. They're going to, the final day, that Sunday that they tee off, going to be a moment of silence, national TV to commemorate and talk about, hey, what's happening the very next day. They're here on the Sunday, the 30th, and then the 31st kicks off. The Ironman Tulsa, one of their stops is to actually come through Greenwood, and they intentionally wanted to celebrate and commemorate Greenwood. So we're getting a lot of partners from all over the country that's saying we want to be there and we want to commemorate with you. So a lot of things are happening. So look for that, and we can actually share that with Tina, and Tina can actually send that out to everyone as well.
Yeah. And I think it's not too late for your businesses, your church, maybe your kids, grandkids, school programs, or whatever. There are a lot of resources that are available. If you want to, I know Phil can help you. The Tulsa Historical Society can also provide information. So if you want to plan something within your own circles, we'd love to help you with that. Phil, thanks so much. What a true Tulsa treasure you are. So glad that you made your way, sent in that resume just to get him to shut up, and then you stayed, and we're the better for it. So thank you very much.
Thank
President
you, Michelle,
Paul.
and thank you, Rotary Club of Tulsa. And I see there's one last question. Brian asked, where's the new building on the pathway? So the new building is at the corner of Greenwood and Archer. If you ever come down here to a Tulsa Drillers baseball game and have parked anywhere around the Greenwood Chamber buildings, or come to Lefties on Greenwood, we're right there on the south east corner, Greenwood and Archer, and that historically was the gateway to what was Black Wall Street and the Main Street area. So even historic in where we're building it. So
Thanks, Phil.
thank you.
Thank you, Phil. On behalf of everybody here, thank you for taking time to speak with us today. I, for one, can't wait to be able to tour the museum that you're helping put together and become a reality. Our club foundation typically gives funding for various organizations throughout the year. This year it was determined early on that we'd give one substantial gift of $82,000 to the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. And we had some coverage. This is from the GTR, Greater Tulsa Reporter, early on about the $82,000 gift we gave. And so for behalf of our club and foundation, I want to say thank you, Phil, for working on where to best decide to utilize our gift. Thank you again for joining us today. Special announcements. This week's sponsors, I want to say thank you for Spirit Bank, Rhonda Hayes, TC Blair, Gable Gottwalls, Jeff Hassel, John Dale, Paul Rossler, the Greater Tulsa Reporter, Forrest Cameron, Small and Associates Financial, Chris McCune, Corporate Realty Advisors, Carl Vincent. And for upcoming programs next week, we have January 20th, Rick Dixon, TU Athletic Director, will be our guest speaker. So please join us again next week. We don't have a Sarge time this week, and we'll look forward to that next week. So we'll adjourn a little early. Thank you for joining our meeting today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. And with that, we're adjourned.